Thousand Autumns, is a Meng Xi Shi novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer. The main couple of the story is made up of two men. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Extra number 5. Shen Qiao's eyes were working, so there was no way he had the wrong person. What surprised him was that the other had the nerve to appear here. Apart from exchanging his usual outfit for a Daoist robe, he didn't even modify his appearance in the slightest, still wearing that impassive face, sitting in the palace of Chen, as an esteemed guest of the emperor. It was widely known that Chen was within the jurisdiction of the Ru sects. To put it bluntly, Ky saw it as his exclusive domain, not permitting the purview of outsiders. For example, the Buddhist sect Tiantai sect was similarly located within Chen's borders, but was all but suffocated by Linchuangxiugong. In hand-to-hand combat, Yan Wushi naturally didn't fear Ky, but after all he had the local stronghold, the lofty Huanyu sect Zongji disguising himself as a Daoist to enter the palace to see the emperor, with intentions of snatching away some of Ru's influence, drawing the Ru sect's enmity. This kind of rumor, if it got out, would do no good. As Shen Qiao saw it, the other really had no need to bring this trouble onto himself. That being said, Yan Wushi was Yan Wushi. If everything he did could be anticipated by others, then he would no longer be Yan Wushi. Maybe it was because Shen Qiao's gaze lingered too long on Yan Wushi. The Beimanguan Daoist next to him took notice, and so turned his head and whispered, "Shen Daiyu, do you recognize that Daiyu over there?" Shen Qiao, "No, I just arrived in Jiankang, and still need Zhang Daiyu to introduce me to the others." Zhang Daoshi said, "I only recognize the two opposite you. They're Daoists from Lanshuiguan in the capital. Lanshuiguan is even more decrepit than our Beimanguan. Who knows how those two were able to trick the official into bringing them in here." Shen Qiao didn't know how to react. It was said that those that walk the same path are easy enemies. Although the Daoists appeared to cultivate towards equanimity and immortality, in actuality within the sects there were still 100 variations of personality. I heard that previously several Daiyu already had an audience with the emperor. Was the emperor not satisfied with them? Zhang Daoshi, the emperor seeks immortality, naturally seeks the expertise of the Daoist sects, but the Ru sects firmly oppose this. Within the capital Donghai is the largest Daoguan. The emperor originally sought out Daoists from Donghaiguan. Rumor has it that halfway through the session, the Ru sects found out that Ky is so annoying. He had the Empress Dowager step in, exposed the Donghaiguan Daoists' illusory demonstration, and chase them away. On this point, Zhang Daoshi appeared to revel in their downfall, but if that hadn't been the case, we would have never gotten a chance to prove ourselves. Those Donghaiguan Daoists wanted to be the sole benefactors of the prize, and so were easily defeated. If all of the Daoists in Jiankang could stand together, why would we have anything to fear from Linchuangxiugong? Shen Qiao thought, even if we took the sum of all of you, you would still be no match against Ky. If that's the case, how come we haven't seen any people from Linchuangxiugong on our venture into the palace today? Zhang Daoshi, you're new here, so you don't know. Not long after the new emperor ascended, Lord Shixing started an uprising. Ky is currently deployed with the troops to quash the rebellion. The Empress Dowager is overseeing things here in court. Not wanting to bear the terrible heat today, she's relocated to another hall to deal with political matters. Shen Qiao came to an abrupt realization. No wonder the emperor was so carefree. When there's no tiger on the mountain, even the monkey can declare itself king. If the Empress Dowager were to discover this, she might throw a fit at the emperor. Will we also be persecuted? Zhang Daoshi, it's not like that. I've looked into this. The Empress Dowager has her origins in the RU sects, but she doesn't discriminate against Buddhism or Daoism, not like Ruyan Ky, that old geezer. If it were up to him he'd burn all of the other sects within Chen to the ground. We have the Emperor's favor. As long as we're careful, nothing bad should happen to us. He wasn't a bad person, he'd been completely forthcoming with Shen Qiao, but even if the Empress Dowager did decide to persecute them later, it was no impediment against people's ambitions, the allure of riches. After all, those Donghaiguan Daoists had only just been kicked out, one invitation from the Emperor, and all the seats here were occupied again. Of course, there was also a fake Daoist this time. Shen Qiao couldn't help casting another look at Yan Wushi. The other was looking straight ahead, still seated silently with brows knitted. He might have actually been a virtuous Daoist. After a few moments, accompanied by the attendant's pronouncement, a young person with a few hairs on his chin walked out from behind the screen. Everyone rose to their feet to provide their formal greeting. The Emperor's steps were not hurried nor slow, it carried the leisurely air of nobility. Since antiquity this pattern of footsteps, resembling dynasties past, were considered by many esteemed personages to be the marker of a true sovereign. Unlike him, the other Daoists wouldn't be thinking in this vein. Seeing the Emperor's arrival, all they were thinking about was how to garner his favor, and come out a step ahead. After the Emperor was seated, he asked all of the Daoists present, "I have gone over the various books and teachings of the schools. The RU sects value compassion, the Buddhist sects value reincarnation, only the Daoist sects value this life. All of the Daozang here today, what are your thoughts on this?" The closer your seat the better, the Emperor regarded you. Everyone gave their response in turn. One of the Daoists surnamed Lin gave this response: "The Buddhists say we have 3 lifetimes, then the past life and the next life. Who would know any of it? As for the saying past life accrues virtue, this life all riches, the Daoists have a different take. For example, your Highness is seated on the throne because your Highness is the Ziwei sovereign star incarnate. If a sovereign star, then how would it have a past and next life? So this poor one believes that saying is a falsehood. Your Highness is of the heavens. If you cultivate diligently, there is no worry about not ascending, your return to the class of the celestials is certain." The Emperor was very interested. Then, as this Daozang sees it, how should I cultivate, to return to the heavens? Lin Daoshi, N, the Daoist method, with origins in the sect's inner cultivation, that plus supplementation with rare elixirs, will naturally lead to immortality. This poor one has some knowledge with regard to brewing elixirs. I'm ready to serve your Highness. Emperor of Chen, good. Then the Nyegong cultivation method you allude to, how to go about it? Lin Daoshi, a grimace, this poor one is lacking. Everyone has their own set of skills. This poor one specializes in elixirs. I do not know much about the sect's inner cultivation methods, but Suandus Han and King Qinchin are both 100-year Daoist sects. If your Highness sent someone over, I bet they'll do everything to comply. He was speechless towards these Lin Daoshi types who dragged others down with them. The Emperor harumphed coldly. Suandus Han accepted the Northern Dynasty's conferred title. Rumor has it they're erecting a Daoguan in Chang'an. They're nothing but lackeys for the North. How talented could those people be? I could send someone to King Qinchin. If Yi Baikan has any skill, I have no qualms following Suandus Han's example, and confer upon him a title, so that he may work to our benefit. Within the hall suddenly someone started to laugh softly. Chen Shubeo, enraged, "Who are you?" Yan Wushi put down the wine cup he had in his hand, unaffected by the Emperor's rage. The guards at the ready, he said slowly, "I'm laughing at your Highness' inability to recognize the gem right in front of you. Clearly there's a master right here in this very hall, but you insist on pushing away what's close for something far. Yi Baikan has a reputation to be sure, but he lost to Hulagu. Is that really considered true power? Chen Qiao gave a cold laugh. Oh? Then, the master you speak of, are you alluding to yourself? Yan Wushi, no, not quite. Chen Qiao was born as the empress' son, conferred the title of crown prince, his life entirely smooth sailing. Apart from the fright he received at the actual ascension ceremony, he had never experienced any other hardship or setback. Of course he was arrogant, moreover he was the emperor, this kind of attitude was only normal. Yan Wushi didn't wait for the other to explode before pointing in Shen Qiao's direction. The emperor seeks a master, but does not see this master. He finally knew the reason why Yan Wushi had barged his way in here. It was to cause trouble, also could be considered to wreak general havoc. Did his earlier evasiveness hurt him so deeply, that he was using this method to get revenge? Shen Qiao's thoughts turned in this direction, and suddenly he was a little sad. The emperor's attention was thus diverted. Following the direction Yan Wushi was pointing, he looked in Shen Qiao's direction. Seeing him, he made a small noise of surprise. Shen Qiao had been sitting by the door. Due to the brightness outside, the emperor had not paid much attention. Now looking more closely, he discovered that the other was actually extraordinary, the kind of person that fortune smiled upon. The emperor inquired, "Who are you? Which Daoguan do you train under?" Things as they were, Shen Qiao couldn't pretend to not have heard. He stood up, folded his hands in greeting. "Thank you, Your Highness, for inquiring. This poor one is Shen Qiao. I've traveled from the north. For the moment I am a guest at Baimenguan." The emperor's foul mood on account of Yan Wushi had vanished. Instead he was very amicable with Shen Qiao, smiling. "Since Daozang was able to receive someone's recommendation, it's certain you're quite renowned on the outside. It's just me that has never heard of you." Shen Qiao said, "Your Highness is too kind. This poor one is merely a wandering Daoist, with no reputation to speak of, and of no one's interest. This poor one does not know why just now that day I recommended this poor one." The ball was in his court was kicked back. The emperor paid this no mind. He was absolutely uninterested in Yan Wushi. He asked Shen Qiao again, "Does Daozang have any expertise on brewing elixirs?" Shen Qiao shook his head. "This poor one does not practice brewing elixirs, this poor one cultivates one path only." "Emperor of Chen, what cultivation path is that?" Shen Qiao, "My cultivation path is the heart's intention." These were the same words he had made up to flummox the official. This moment before the emperor, he didn't change any of the packaging. "Emperor of Chen, perplexed, what is the path that is the heart's intention?" Shen Qiao, "The usual Daoist cultivation values asceticism in mind and in desire. Only distance from the secular world will allow progress. My cultivation, however, requires that the body be situated in the extravagances of life, passing through the world's luxuries, savoring every experience. Only then will there be progress." He said everything earnestly, his expression serious. No one would think he was speaking nonsense, just that they themselves had never heard of such a cultivation method. Yan Wushi merrily drank another sip of wine. He thought, "Rhiao has learned to swindle people with a straight face." The emperor was ecstatic. "Isn't this just the cultivation method that I have been searching for all this time? I implore Daozang to stay a long time in court and teach me the way." Shen Qiao said, "This poor one wanders the world. My path is not fixed. It was only on account of hearing Your Highness' interest in Daoist cultivation, that I ventured into the palace to aid Your Highness. Please forgive me." The emperor chuckled. "There are some inconsistencies in Daozang's words. Since you cultivate the path that is the heart's intention, you would of course relish the secular world's luxuries. I can confer upon you every wealth, so why would you push back now, unless you mean to loosen the snare before tightening it, wanting it but still rejecting. This young emperor merely did not like managing political affairs, he preferred leisure, that's all. It didn't mean that his brain wasn't sharp, it was quite the opposite. He was accomplished in music, wiki, poetry, arts, etc. He could be considered an extremely talented emperor, his interests far more broad than Yang Jian's hunting ability. Shen Qiao's expression didn't change. Your Highness, that is not what I mean. To cultivate the path that is the heart's intention, I do not need to live in the palace, otherwise I won't be able to hear the clamor of the city, attend its wine shops. I can cultivate in any place. Moreover, this poor one already had the fortune to look upon your Highness today. I am quite satisfied, but I do have a few words that I would like to say. The emperor raised a brow. Speak. Shen Qiao, the cultivation path that is the heart's intention doesn't prohibit luxury, just more the well-being of all of your subjects, their housing, clothing, food, and lives. Everyone pursues the former, but your Highness is the sovereign of a nation, and I hope you won't forget the latter. This cultivation method that was the heart's intention was actually made up by Shen Qiao as a test for the emperor. He didn't think that the emperor would be so delighted, he was a little disappointed, and so said more just now to provide counsel. The emperor was unimpressed. Daozang worries too much, with your celestial appearance, wandering the outskirts is truly a waste of the heavens. If you want to give me counsel, you ought to stay here, and discuss Daoism with me every day. Towards the end of his words, the meaning became deeper, forcing people to ponder over them over and over. Shen Qiao heard a hint of something unusual in his words. He hadn't expected that the emperor would have other intentions towards him. He had only felt that seeing something in person was better than hearing about them. Chen was in the south, its territory was no smaller than the north, but Chen Shubao had demonstrated today his inferiority to Yang Jian. The north was currently sharpening its knives, Yang Jian was busy stabilizing the Xiongnu, placating court factions, whereas Chen Shubao had done nothing to quell the uprising in his country. Instead he became interested in elixirs. If things continued this way, in a couple more years, perhaps the outcome would be decided. The two of them engrossed in their conversation, ignoring everyone else present. The Daoists who were trying to get ahead were ready to jump out of their seats. There were plenty of people willing to stand up for the emperor. They started to speak out of turn. Some admonished Shen Qiao for his impertinence, some rushed to recommend themselves to the emperor, to demonstrate their superiority over Shen Qiao. Yan Wushi suddenly smiled. Qiao, now you know why I don't hold the south in high regard. Shen Qiao hadn't had time to say anything before someone replied, I did not know Yan Zongju and Shen Daozun had arrived, please forgive me for not coming out to greet you. In the next moment, a woman with a crowd of servants and guards made a grand entrance. The emperor's expression changed. He stood up to greet her, Mother. The newcomer was indeed the Chen dynasty Empress Dowager Lu Jingjian, Ruyan Ky's Shime. End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.